On today's episode, we talk to Mark and Matt at MPrint. We talk about printed portfolios, why they're important, are they still relevant, how do you display them, do you use box, do you use screw post, do you use sleeves, what's the advantages of different papers. We cover it all. So grab a drink, coffee, whatever you're poison, and let's get to it. Good morning, Greg. How are you, pal? Greg? Right. Oh, a message. I'm on a cruise ship in Norway on a shoot. Right. So I'm doing this one on my own. Cool. Okay. So, bought some gear, didn't I? No, I haven't. I'm being very good. But I'm not going to do another intro of the episode talking about that because gas is bad. And we shouldn't be buying equipment in the current climate. Hope people are starting to busy up, if at all. And if you're not, don't worry. There's a lot of people in the same boat. On today's show, we are talking to the excellent chaps over at MPrint, and we talk about printed portfolios, why they're important. I kind of play devil's advocate because I don't have a printed portfolio, so it's slightly awkward when I raise my hand. What I didn't mention is that when I did a portfolio meeting the other day in a beer garden in the sun, both of my iPad portfolios, they overheated, which is not something you get with print books. But it's a great chat. Greg is here for this, not for the intro. He's obviously done the fun bit and left me with the really gutsy bit. And this is me on my own talking. It's very awkward doing a show intro on your own when you're obviously part of a hilarious double act. But I was going to pretend to be Greg, but I didn't want to upset him. Anyway, listen, without me moaning on and on or going on and on, here is the interview with the wonderful guys at MPrint. Thanks very much for listening.
This week on the pod, we are delighted to be joined by MPrint. MPrint is made up of Mark Schlossman and Matt Reeford, and they join us from two different locations in the UK. But you guys, generally, when you're in the office, you're based in South London. Tell us a little bit about what you do. I don't know which one of you wants to kind of take the mantle and run with this, but give us a bit of background on what MPrint is.
So I've known Mark for a long time, and which maybe we might get into a little later. It's kind of an interesting story around that. But when I moved out of London, I was looking for a kind of foothold to keep in London. Most of my clients and work were coming through there. And there was a space in the office that Mark has that kind of came up conveniently. So I moved in, and we then looked into getting a printer, doing some work together, and we kind of wanted to find a way to make it pay for itself. And we started finding some work for photographers, doing some printing. And then we got our first portfolio job, which linked us with Kathy Robert up at Delta Design, who kind of a lot of photographers will know. And our relationship with Kathy was kind of really key early on. She put us in touch with other photographers and so on. And we grew from there, really. Printing.
So fundamentally, for our listener, you guys work with photographers, printing their work for printed portfolios, effectively.
Yeah, we work very closely with our photographers because I'm sitting in the space where we work. It's small. There's nowhere to hide. We do initial consultations with our photographers and go over things like paper choices and looking at their files on our system. So we're right there with our clients, our photographers from the beginning. Yeah.
And you both have a background in photography yourselves, right?
Yeah, we're photographers printing for photographers. That sounds kind of simple, but that actually means a lot in terms of our business because we're looking at our clients' work like as photographers. We're not just printing. We're not just putting sheets of paper through the machines and sort of taking credit card. We're not a portal. That's the last thing we are. We're not a portal where you upload your files. You get a lot of us when you come to see us. Yeah.
See, I think that's great. I think that's if I was going to come and get a printed portfolio, you guys would be the number one stop for me, knowing that you're going to be looking at my work in the same way, not in the same way, but kind of looking for the same things as I am. I've had a lot of quite shabby prints in the past, obviously none from you guys, but they're just run automated through a machine that just runs 24 hours a day. They've got blotchy areas of blacks and all sorts of terrible stuff. Whereas I think I'd feel much better about bringing my work to you guys, knowing that you're going to look over the files with the same calibrated monitors and go, okay, look, this is what's going to be best. But it's also, being photographers, you can stay up to date with the trends, and so you know that gloss paper is still not a thing, and you'll be able to kind of really kind of help people through it from a real level of experience.
Yeah, we're not, as kind of Mark was alluding to, we're not there as technicians purely, just kind of running the machines and there to sort of optimize every last bit out of the machines, which we kind of do work on as well. But we are there with a photographer's eye, with a creative eye, and we find the clients find that really helpful. Both in terms of when they're kind of bringing the work to us, we often get asked for advice on sort of running orders and the imagery as well. And then in terms of then kind of if we spot potential issues with the files, either from a kind of technical point, but also kind of creative things that we kind of feel might be useful to feedback to the photographers. It definitely gives us an extra sort of dimension to look at things.
Amazing. With the dynamic of obviously both still being working photographers, how do you balance that?
Well, I suppose you mean in terms of assignments and, I'm kind of at a different point in my career. So I'm 62. I'm kind of closer to the end of my career than the beginning. My client base has kind of shifted a lot, and printing has been a really important sort of income stream. It's become really good for us. I haven't found that I can't get everything done. Matt, what do you think?
Yeah. Having two of us there means that if one of us is busy, the other's able to to pick up the slack, and vice versa. And we also bring in assistants to help with printing as well during busy periods. I do less photography now than I did before. So I do still have kind of regular clients and work throughout the year, but it's not my predominant kind of income source. So retouching and the printing is, but again, obviously that they both compete for time to some extent. Yeah, between the two of us, we make it work on a timing basis. There are occasionally times where we're going to have to say to clients, well, we're going to have to do this next week for you, or we can't turn it around by tomorrow, for the guys who kind of get in touch last minute. But 99% of the time, we manage to make the balance work. Okay,
awesome. So let's go back to the very basics of what it is you guys have built the whole business around. I'm not going to say what is a portfolio. We all know what portfolios are. What makes a good portfolio?
I think.
Yeah, I mean, a good portfolio for me has a beginning, a middle, and an end. If you know how you want to start it out in terms of your edit and sequence, you really want to wow people. You turn the first page, and you make someone hungry if you're a food portfolio. If you make someone hungry if you're a food photographer, you make somebody want to stand on a beach if you're showing them landscapes. And then they turn pages 2 and 3, and they want to see that that's not a fluke. And then you get into the meat of it to show that you're legit, you've done this before, and then you have a great ending. So I think what makes a great portfolio really comes down to that editing and sequencing. And Matt and I, when we first got into this, we thought, well, we'll just be printing, right? And what it's turned out is that we end up seeing as many portfolios as some agents or commissioning editors or art buyers. And so we see every decision that the photographer has made in terms of the edit and the sequence. And that's been a really interesting process. So yeah, we do see a lot of portfolios.
No, that's awesome. I think also photographers are I'm speaking from my personal experience. I'm shocking at editing my portfolio order. I really don't like doing it. I'm kind of like I think a lot of us were so attached to a particular image or a kind of a particular string of images that it's a nightmare to then someone comes in and goes, well, actually, that's actually a weakest work. And I'm like, yeah, but I climbed and I survived living in a rubbish dump for it. You're all personally attached to it. Do you ever kind of see stuff where you go, that doesn't belong in the book at all? And then at that point, what do you do? Because obviously they've come to you for printers. Do you then just kind of go, well, actually, I don't think this one flows at all? Or, how do you kind of deal with that?
I guess
we do. Go on, Matt. Yeah.
I was just going to say, on one level, we're there to provide a service for our client coming to us. So, we take our lead from them. So, if there's been no indication that they're looking for any input from us on that level, then obviously we're not going to sort of go, oh, hey, so we thought pictures 3, 5, and 8 weren't great. Maybe you should cut them out of your portfolio. That's sort of not how it's to do that. But people come to us at different stages of the process, and sometimes they're quite early on in the process, and because it is quite a difficult process editing your own work, as you say, they might then sort of disappear off for 2 or 3 months, and we kind of think, well, okay, I guess maybe they kind of decided to go a different path, and then then eventually they kind of come back to us, and having realised, it is quite a lengthy process to edit, to curate, and put it all together. But people do come to us and say, hey guys, what do you think? Have you got any feedback? And that can be on whether it's sort of technically, do you think this stuff's going to print well? Do you see any issues with it? Or, can you give us some feedback on your running order and so on? So I guess on a general level, no, we're not going to sort of say to people, hey, maybe you should sort of take a look at rearranging your portfolio or taking some things out. But we definitely, behind closed doors, and have opinions, maybe.
Of course.
We're a tough audience at this point, for sure. And I guess if there's some useful things to come out of that, I mean, yeah, Tom, you said it. You got to kill your babies sometimes, and I think just in the process of taking something quite big and distilling it down to fewer images, it gets more powerful. Those edits get more powerful. I think the things that we see, if we see a portfolio that seems too big, like too many images, often enough there's a lot of repetition in there. That's kind of it feels like the photographer couldn't decide which of that series of 5 images to put in there, and it could be stronger if you took 2 or 3 out. So
sure.
And we're talking about the same scenario, like the same model in the same Lycra on the same running track, doing different things. So, that's one thing. But again,
I think that answers goes back to answer your question, Tom, about what makes a good portfolio. Like concision, is that a word? Being concise. Not having too much padding in there, or not having any padding in there really. It's more powerful, as kind of Mark said, to have a less imagery within reason, which is all strong than than padding things out to sort of try and make it up to whatever you think your number count should be.
Right.
And what would you say would be? Yeah, go on. Same question. No, what's your kind of?
Yeah, exact same question. How long is the perfect portfolio? And what is the number count? How many pages? How many double kind of sides? Obviously some people's work, I guess, will be suiting slightly shorter books and some maybe slightly longer, but is there kind of like an average that you tend to kind of print?
I'd say sort of when people ask the question, we kind of, and having spoken to agents quite a lot about this as well, people obviously have different answers, but sort of 30 to 40 images is a good number of pictures. If you haven't got your message across perhaps after 40 pictures, potentially, I mean, people do have bigger bodies of work, of course, but that would be sort of the average, I would say. But if you're starting out, 20, 25 pictures is fine. And equally, I think, I forget now what it was, Mark, but I think we printed 125 double-sided pages for some other form. So that's the sort of other extreme of things.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a book.
That's a book. I mean, you can almost feel the art director's heart sinking.
Just the desperation.
Table. Yeah.
Bang.
That's the
Wow.
biggest. That's the biggest we've done. And yeah, I think for new photographers, Matt said the number 20, 24. I think a couple dozen. I advised. She asked for my advice, young photographer, and recently, and I said, well, a couple dozen. I think 20 means that's not quite enough, but 24 minimum. And yeah, I agree with the 30 to 40. And again, as Matt said, we've heard that agents sort of feel the same way as well.
What do you tend to see in size as well for portfolios? There's kind of, there must be, because for me, having 125 pages, not only is that kind of a lot for someone to go through, it also kind of limits how much you're really going to want to slog that book around town and take it in for meetings. Sometimes you might have a couple of meetings a day, and if you have turned having a book into a physical kind of effort, it actually can be counterproductive. So not only what are we talking about for kind of popular sizes for portfolios these days?
Well, the average size is A3. I'd say, Matt, jump in. I'd say about 80% of what we print is A3. That's usually landscape A3. We mentioned portfolio makers. We have strong relationships, close relationships with portfolio makers in London and in the UK. They need a certain amount of, excuse me, let me do that again. At the gutter, they need a certain amount of space so that the portfolio maker gets that, and then you have the viewable area. But usually people are talking about doing an A3 landscape portfolio. A3 Plus is also popular. The biggest we've done is a custom A2 cut down to a particular dimension that photographer wanted, but that is a big portfolio. Never, Matt, have we done any A4 portfolios for photographers?
We've done a couple. We've had a couple of A4 clients where it's been, I think, probably more of a lookbook type thing that they wanted to take out as a supplementary piece, perhaps. So we have had a couple of clients, but yeah, predominantly A3 landscape, as Mark said. For the minority, to some extent, of portrait orientation clients, they're more inclined to go for the A3 Plus and cut it down because it gives you the full width of an A3 page once you've kind of allowed for the gutter. So you get it, and then you just chop the top off because otherwise it becomes very tall and thin. We've had a few clients who want a squarer book, which is kind of something that Mark and I have always discussed as being a really flexible option that people don't tend to go for. If you're in a portrait book trying to print landscape images, obviously they kind of come up pretty small. In a landscape book printing portrait, it somehow kind of works better, and you're also able to sort of, especially on a double page spread, for example, you could have two portrait images on either side, which still kind of works okay. But if you're having a squarer book anyway, you're able to make better use of the space. But it's just not something we see very much.
Thinking about A4 once again, actually, I printed just in the last few weeks some A4 prints that were loose, just going in a box. A photographer came in, and that's what they take out, which is quite cool because when someone sees something that they really like, you can leave that with them. So it's a leave behind. And then it's pretty cheap to print up another A4 piece, and it's loose. It's not a page that's been, placed in a portfolio that hasn't been punched and scored. Yeah.
Talking about pricing, obviously you have the pricing available on the website, which I think is just mprint.co.uk, right?
Yep,
that's true.
So if people want to kind of talk along through pricing and have a look through there, obviously go and have a look at the website. Obviously, cost of living, everything's gone up. How badly has it affected paper costs, print and ink costs, and just general machine costs? I assume it's probably been quite considerable, especially on paper. Has it been 30%?
Paper costs have gone up a lot. We were kind of talking about this the other day. Kind of ordered some paper from one of our regular suppliers, and the cost of an A3 Plus box of paper is now what the A2 cost used to be. So it's not an insignificant amount that the increases happened. We put our prices up marginally, sort of just around the time of lockdown. So we kind of wanting to protect our clients to some extent from that. We don't want to sort of put them up again too soon. We've also always tried to keep our prices pretty similar to print space in Metro's sort of basic cost, because we know it's an expensive process. People aren't generally coming to us for 1 or 2 prints. So if you're coming to us for 30 double-sided prints, it's quite an investment. And so we just try and sort of keep level with what the other guys are offering on that level.
Yeah, Matt and I have a joke. We're gonna get a T-shirt made. It says MPrint, small, hungry, and paranoid. I mean, we are small. It's just the two of us. We're hungry. We want your work. As Matt said, the average price of a job is kind of a lot. You're coming to us for at least 24 prints, as we were saying before. And the paranoid bit just kind of speaks to we're only as good as our last job, and word of mouth is for all of us. All of us here is like it's very valuable.
I guess the thing is with photography, especially as it's more prevalent now than ever, really, is the idea of being able to get those images off a screen, off from pixels, and being able to print them, and the difference that makes when you're seeing them. That does tend to go in kind of trends, doesn't it, in terms of popularity? I wonder, there was talk a few years ago of kind of photographers saying, well, actually, most of my clients now are going to use my images digitally. But do you feel like the impact of seeing something in print still has, for one, you can totally control the kind of, the paper stock, the colours in it, whereas if you're doing something digitally, you're a little bit more at mercy to what screen someone's looking at, whether or not that's got reflections and stuff. Sell us the power of the print, basically. Convince me.
I think you could, even from the position of our clients coming in, like a certain section of them, this will be the first time they've seen their images in print. And when they come in, they come in and they meet us, and we kind of go through their files on screen, and they choose a paper. But at this point, it's still somewhat theoretical. And then we do the work for them, and we encourage people to come back in once we've printed, so they go through everything and make sure they're happy with appearance and so on. And even just on the reaction of the photographers, they come back in and they see the prints, or if they don't get the chance to do that, work goes up to Kathy, they put it in the book. And from their point of view, they're like, wow, I've never seen my work in print before, this looks fantastic. So then taking that enthusiasm and taking it out to your meetings with something kind of concrete, tactile, that you can sort of drop on someone's desk and go through with them, it's there's a very sort of tangible, effect that it has, and that speaks to the power of what the item is, really.
Do you think there's also more reverence, perhaps, from an art director or a picture editor who's actually going to be looking at a physical book and physical print rather than something which they're just swiping through, in a sense of, when you've gone to the effort of actually having something printed and presented, it's almost a little bit more formal.
Yeah, and also bound in a sense, because even if you're using a screw post portfolio where you can shuffle pages in and out and change the order, it's still showing a commitment to where you are as a photographer right now. And, especially if you bind that and you stitch it together, it's saying to people, well, this is where I am, and this is what I want you to see, and you can't change it up so much. And a friend and one of our clients, Phil Sharp, the photographer, came in the other day and said, you guys are in the business of making digital things real. And I think there still is a lot of impact. There still is a lot of impact for the printed image. Lisa Pritchard, the agent who we've presented with before, she says, if your work's ever going to be in print, you need to have a printed portfolio.
Okay, here's another one for you then, another controversial talking point. Acetate sleeves.
Oof.
How much do you hate them or love them?
Hate them.
What's your opinion?
Them. Well, most people hate them because they're coming to us to get out of acetate. So sleeves are heavy. Greg, you were talking about that before, lugging portfolios around. That adds a lot of weight to the portfolio. Sleeves have their own problem. You automatically have a glossy print there instead of a less reflective surface like a matte or a rag paper. Acetate sleeves scratch. They get dented. That alters the way light's reflected. That's annoying. If you get any grit underneath there, portfolio is kind of constantly moving around, even if it's sitting on the windowsill of your agent. When it gets picked up, it's a moving thing. Those pages move against each other. You can get scratches on the print from the acetate with grit under there. I think what we've seen, I would say, Matt, you can weigh in, but I'd say how many people are on acetate sleeves of the few hundred clients that we have? It's a handful, literally a handful.
or less than that. I mean, I guess there are obviously people still using them, but then generally not coming to us. I mean, as Mark kind of said at the beginning, just even the bulk of it, from us, if you want a double-sided print, there's one sheet of paper with us. If you're doing it with an acetate sheet, you've got the sheet, you've got the divider, you've got 2 prints in there. That's just one double-sided page kind of thing. So it's we also get people who have portfolios with acetate sleeves in. They want to reuse the portfolios. So there's a bit of readjustment that can be done to sort of page size and cut down to then use the book to take the sleeves out. But yeah, I don't remember the last time anyone's come to us saying they just wanted kind of straight prints out that were going to go into an acetate book, for sure.
In a sort of indirect way, we've kind of gotten to double-sided printing there. Yeah, acetate sleeves, they're useful. If you back 2 prints together, you got a double side and put them in one sleeve. You got a double-sided print. We've been around. MPrint's been around for about 10 years, and it's only in the last few years that people kind of call up now and just assume that we do double-sided printing, or that's the reason they've come to us. That's kind of cool, because before we've had to kind of say, have you thought about double-sided printing? Because we do it. And we seem to be, so far, the only people who do it on a sort of big scale in London or in the UK. And, if you go to Print Space in London or Metro Imaging or Genesis, we have an arrangement with them where those labs will send you to us, and that's been really useful. So, but double-sided printing, a lot of people are seeing the value of it. It definitely opens up a lot of creative possibilities.
And just the sort of just to put the other side of that against the acetate sleeves, double-sided printing does make things a little more complex. Where with an acetate sleeve book, if you need to swap pages out, it's very easy. You just take a print out, put a print in. You need to think about things a bit more carefully with double-sided printing. If you want to insert some work later, obviously, you can't split the pages sort of, very easily. So you just need to sort of plan that out a bit more. So that would be the one drawback, if anything, in terms of double-sided printing. But aside from that,
I mean, if we're doing talk about double-sided printing, I used to have a printer, and I used to do a double-sided portfolio. I used to home print it. Hated the process. So to meet people who actually love it and do it for a job is kind of fascinating to me, because I think I would have rather cut my testicles off and put them in acid. But do you know when a printer gets 79 or 92% through a print, and then for some reason just has a moment? I mean, you guys probably don't have this because your machines are probably way more maintained than mine were. But it happens, right? I used to have it when I was doing the double-sided prints. So I don't know, you guys probably don't do this. You probably have a proper technique for it. But I used to put tracing paper on the side that had already been printed.
Yeah.
And then you know the technique, right? And then you run it all through the printer. And then it would get to the very last bit of the second print. And then it would run out of an ink. And then you just end up having like just loads of cyan just over the whole thing and things like that. Like, do you guys, I mean, obviously you guys are way more pro and way more set up for this. Do those sort of things still happen to you guys? Like,
how many printers have you thrown out the window, I think is what he's asking.
Well,
because they have a moment, don't they?
They do.
My back wouldn't like picking up a printer and breaking through a window. But yeah, I think that it's always, the printer always stops and needs a new cartridge and then leaves a line or something on the print. It's always at the last print or the last 2 prints of a huge portfolio that you're just trying to get out the door on a deadline. It is faffy. It is difficult, double-sided printing. We charge a little bit more for double-sided prints to account for the waste that you were talking about, Tom. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and also the hassle to be able to do it how you guys do it. I think if people don't or have never printed themselves, they don't quite understand the skill level that you have to be able, and also how fine-tuned all your kit has to be to avoid track marks and things like that,
Yeah.
especially if you're printing a lot of black ink on a page, to then not get any lines through that black ink. So I think when you say you charge a little bit more for the wastage, well, I think you should charge a lot more, because it's the amount of hassle that it is. I mean, having just from my experience, I think they have a real level of impact when you come in and you do have the double-sided portfolio, and it looks, people feel like they're going through a real book, right? Like it feels a bit more like a story, and I know people really do enjoy it.
Exactly.
But the skill and the technical that you have to be able to do that and then still be smiling at the end of it is, kudos to you. I mean, we'll address a bit of an elephant in the room, because I am unfortunately that elephant. I am one of these photographers who does not have a printed portfolio. Yeah. So, what do you guys think about people like me?
Well,
I'd say-
you were talking about this the other day, and Mark kind of said, it's not for everyone. Everyone's not going to have it, and there are, it is an elephant in the room. It's like for us, or to the people who said, well, I've got a website, I've got my Instagram account, I've got an iPad. Why do I need a printed portfolio? And we can sort of put forward the things we were discussing earlier. But it isn't necessarily for everyone, and whilst we would like it. Sorry.
Even though I don't have a printed book, I still actually do think it is really important. I do think the only reason I don't is because I shoot so much moving image that is basically how I have it all. When you flick through my book, it is still moving image.
Okay.
And to then have that displayed in a book and an iPad at the same time, I found to be quite jarring, when I'd be stopping people and be like, oh, if you want to see the moving image part of this, have a look at this iPad. And then they're flipping between the book and the iPad. But I know a lot of people, and probably most people, would just do very well to have like a lovely print book, because it does. Right. Yeah, and this is the flip side. This is devil's advocate against iPad portfolios, which I'm sure you guys will appreciate. It doesn't take a lot of effort to make things look really good and poppy on a screen. Right? I think that's fair. If you have a good quality screen, it'll make the images sing. To make things look good, pop, and sing on paper, that's a real challenge. And that's a real skill. And that comes down to, old school things like your paper choice and stuff like that. So I'm not entirely sure where I'm going with this point. Basically, yes, it works for me, but I seem to be very much in the minority, and I'm very much backing printed portfolios.
You've cracked open like a lot of issues there, but just kind of choosing one, that managing those expectations of that backlit sort of liquid sort of feel when you see it on a good, calibrated screen. And then especially if you choose a rag or a matte paper, it's Matt and I's job it's our job to make sure that what they see on the screen is what they get in a reviewing booth. But and that can be, there's a lot of experience we have now in terms of like, okay, that kind of imagery from that client, we're going to make a little bit of an adjustment to make sure that the image doesn't sit too far down into a matte paper, for instance. And so when I say too far down, I mean, it's got to pop off the paper. It's got to pop off the page when the the potential client turns the page. So that's something that we're kind of doing, almost on an intuitive level at this point.
Yeah, we also have bodies of work that come in and they look great on screen, but they're quite flat. So people kind of tend to, open up the shadows and sort of bring in the highlights. And it works on screen, it's a look. And we then have to sort of say to people, this, especially if they're choosing like a rag paper, for example, this is going to need a bit of help, on screen. And then you sort of try and coach them through, are you happy if I make these choices? Like, we want to maintain the aesthetic that you're going for. But if you don't want this to just sort of soak in and look flat on the paper that you've chosen, we're going to need to sort of give it a bit of help. So we kind of talk people through that, and people get it. And we have had instances where people wanted to kind of keep that, and we have had situations where people have had this flat aesthetic, wanted to stick with it, and then they eventually come around when they see the work and it's like, yeah, okay, we need to sort of add a little bit more punch just to help it pop on the paper, so.
Mm-hmm. Has paper technology changed much in terms of with printers as well in the last 20 years? Are there particular papers that are really good for portfolios now that that weren't around before? Because one thing that always made me a bit nervous about double-sided printed is that you've potentially, if you damage that print, which can happen after a couple of viewings if you're using a kind of more raggy type paper, for example. But are they pretty hard wearing? The type of papers that most people go for.
That's one of the things we do in the first consultation. Is the first thing I do is go to the the first thing I do is go to the website or go to the folder of images that they intend to print and kind of see what the tonality is. If you've got really dark imagery and you're printing borderless with no white borders, that's going to be a real challenge on rag paper. In fact, that thing coming out of the printer, especially double-sided, is a very fragile object indeed. Mm-hmm. And as soon as somebody puts their thumb or their finger on the lower right-hand corner to turn the page on that first viewing, that's a damaged print. So we try and sort of steer people to the paper that would be right for them in terms of double-sided and single-sided. In terms of double-sided paper, there's not enough products out on the market for us. We've recently taken out a couple of new papers and we're really happy to have them. But we're constantly looking for new double-sided products.
And what about
sorry, go on.
Well, I was going to ask about inks as well. Has there been much development in that? Are you guys using specific branded printers that you swear by? Have you kind of over the years decided actually these are the people that know what they're doing and these ones aren't worth or has that changed a lot?
Well, we use Epson printers, but we're always open-minded and looking for new products. Fairly recently, we tested out a Canon product. We wanted to, if there's something out there that does a better job than what we're using, we'd like to be using it. So we tested the product. Beautiful prints, really nice, but it couldn't handle the double-sided. That we just couldn't get a print through that didn't damage the paper. So
bit of a killer that.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly for us. If it's single-sided, then I'm sure they're brilliant, but we just couldn't. We couldn't use it. So we're always testing. We're always looking for new papers. We were looking for a new printer potentially in this case, but that reinforced, I guess, that we're in the right place, doing the right thing with the printers we've got. Mm-hmm. In terms of your question, Greg, but inks, for example, with each new iteration of printer, they are making improvements. We are sort of as print quality gets better and better, obviously the improvements can be a little bit more incremental, but we see improvements in shadow detail, shadow contrast, which are it's worth paying for. We want to sort of make sure we're getting the best out of our prints for our clients.
And I guess if people wanted to if people wanted to I guess if people wanted to come down and see examples of what you guys can do, as you said before, your studio is in South London, right? Is it near Clapham?
Yes, Clapham Common, that area.
And do you quite often have people dropping in just to kind of get a sense of, early consultation before they necessarily make any major decisions to kind of see what you guys can do?
Yeah,
go on.
I was going to say, like, we're not always there. We're usually there, but in terms of, we're both freelancers, as we said at the beginning of the chat. So it's not an open house, drop in when you want. But if you can get in touch and make an appointment, yes, we get people coming in, and we walk them through. We've got one of Kathy's portfolios, which has got all of our paper types in there with prints on, so people can look at the images, see how the images look with the kind of reflective nature of some of the papers or the rag and so on. And because it's been there for a while, we can also show some of the wear and tear issues that you get with the different papers as well, and so on, which is really helpful. We do have paper samples, so if people aren't based in London or can't make it to the studio, we can post paper samples out to them, which is helpful. We always like people to come in. And the other thing is, if you can bring your files in, we can go through them on our screens. We have a sort of unspoken guarantee to people that we're going to give you what your imagery looks like on our screen. So if you're working on an uncalibrated laptop, then we can't guarantee we're going to match that, obviously. But if you can come in and you're happy with the appearance of your files on our screen, then we're confident that we're going to give you prints that you'll be happy with.
Yeah, and the second time we like to see is when you come and collect the prints, because if you check over everything and make sure everything's in perfect shape and the appearance of the image is exactly what you want, you can even get into a discussion with us, like put the image on screen, look at it in the viewing booth, and discuss. And if something slipped through, if we've made a mistake, we reprint it for free. So basically, at the point you've seen your files on our screen, in that initial consultation, you can sleep soundly that night because you know what's on our screen is what you're going to get in the viewing booth.
Right. The viewing booth. Right. From a technical point of view, I really want to know what this is. Right. So I assume it is a calibrated ISO with a comfy chair, a heated mug warmer, like red rope licorice dispenser. So is it? I mean, is it? It's just a calibrated ISO with a curtain that comes around, or what is it?
We have a hood on the system that I'm looking at here, but it's an ISO. It's calibrated. We keep that up to date. I think the conditions in a viewing booth are very controlled, but we have to have a viewing booth for certain difficult images. We sometimes take it to the open door at the back here and look at it in daylight because it just looks different. You cannot account for all the different kinds of light that the viewings will happen in.
Sure.
So the viewing booth is important. We could get into a technical discussion about ballasts, lighting ballasts, and bulbs, and the color of paint that's in that booth. But
let's go. Go on.
Don't excite Tom too much.
It's a very expensive bucket of paint. Matt, is it like 60 quid? It's a certain gray. It's not 18% gray. It's not middle gray. It's viewing booth gray.
Wow.
Viewing booth gray.
Yeah, it's crazy. We repaint it regularly. So the lighting was recommended by somebody who sells this kind of equipment, and so
we built our own viewing booth. Like, you can buy off the shelf ones, but we decided to build our own to give ourselves the space that we wanted in there and to make it work for us. So we so it's a sort of DIY self job to some extent, but we've got the bulbs which are correctly balanced and non-flicker and so on, and the paint that Bart's talking about. So,
and the paint.
Yeah, and the paint.
I need to look up this paint. In our studio, we have a very large north-facing window, which has got a frosting on it, so it almost acts like a big light box, and then a big work table in front of that. So that's where I tend to do any kind of print work there. But I certainly don't have a viewing booth. That's kind of gonna put that on the wish list.
Our window isn't big enough. It's over this shoulder, so we need the viewing booth. Yeah.
Can I go maybe a little bit more back to basics slightly for maybe our listeners who are thinking about having their portfolio printed, don't quite know where to start, and we've talked a lot about the different papers, right? Now, do you just kind of want to just give us a very, very high level overview? Because I don't think, maybe there are some people who don't quite understand the difference the paper choice can have on the finished print. So I think they're not going to maybe understand the difference between a gloss and like a rag, and the contrast levels that are going to be, achieved as a result. So can you give us kind of like an overview of that?
Well, the first thing you need to know is that rag and matte papers are never going to achieve the rich black that a semi-gloss or soft gloss or glossy paper is going to give you. I also feel that rag papers it can be a challenge for us to make sure that all that shadow detail that's in there is in your prints, but that's why you come to us, and so we work hard to get what you see in your shadows on that print. Again, it gets back to the kind of imagery people present. If the histogram is quite spread out and there's not a lot of space between at the highlight end and at the shadow end, it's usually fairly easy to print. But some people will be putting tints and shadows and really saturating colors. And when things go out of gamut, you need to sort of tell the client, look, that red is out of gamut for the paper you've chosen, and I can't guarantee it's going to be perfect in the print. I'll do my best to kind of muscle those reds back to where they should be, but we're kind of managing those expectations if they're on a certain paper and if they've submitted files that have out of gamut colors. So that's all part of the initial consultation. I basically kind of look at their folder of images on our system, and I say to them, don't be offended, but I'm about to just say what I'm thinking in terms of what I'm seeing in your images. In terms of, I'm your printer, so I'm going to tell you what I'm thinking technically about what I'm looking forward to, what I think I'm going to find as we get your images printed out on the paper you've chosen.
Nice. And then when we've talked about RAG, now we're talking about things like Hahnemühle.
Hahnemühle photo rag.
Stupid. Is how you pronounce it?
Hahnemühle, yeah.
Yeah, right. So I was right. Okay. I mean, those papers are fantastic, but whenever I would print my work on them, I would look at it and go, that looks great, but I don't think it's the right paper. And I had kind of, I had dropped not a small amount of money, because I think what we haven't talked about cost-wise is that if you are printing at home, buying the paper and then the ink, you guys actually provide, I would say, excellent value compared to doing that at home or in the office. And what you do is take all the stress out of it, because it's a very, very, again, if people haven't printed at home or tried to print their own stuff, what you guys do is sort of like black magic to me, because I used to find it really stressful. I never used to enjoy it, and then I would get really frustrated with all the kind of the foibles of the printers and stuff. So I think it's excellent value. Again, I've lost the train of thought. I was just basically just going, oh, what you guys do is amazing.
I think it's as we've kind of gotten more into it, the way I approach a new body of work now. I was talking to Matt. We were talking about this the other day. I kind of open up a few of the images and sort of get in my head how I'm going to approach this portfolio. Because once you start printing page one, we always print on a double-sided portfolio. We print the right-hand pages first and then go through and do the left-hand pages. But you get into a rhythm, and certain bodies of work are easier to print than others, and difficult ones, you kind of have to approach it. You have to sort of think, well, am I going to print this in perceptual rendering intent or relative colorimetric? There's all this kind of discuss. Once you sort of start with a plan, you start printing out the first few images, it tends to go a little bit quicker. We are taking that away from you. Like that is a hassle, but it happens a little quicker for us now because we can reference back to similar bodies of work that we printed, and yeah.
How much of your work would you say is portfolio printing versus, do you get many clients coming to you for single prints, for prints that they're selling, or prints that are for that they want to just get done to have up on the wall?
It's something that kind of developed more over lockdown, I would say, for us. So when we got ourselves set up to do more exhibition printing before lockdown happened, which is something that's been great for us. But in terms of those sort of single images, we found photographers were over lockdown looking for different income streams, looking for, just different ways to sort of make money out of their business. And we started to do more print fulfillment for them for print sales. So we do get a steady stream of that coming through. It's still, the portfolios are still the sort of core of what we're up to. But yes, we do get plenty of that. We've got a handful of clients already pushing all that, I suppose, now, who we're doing sort of print fulfillment for, and they're selling their prints through their website or other means, and we then get the order from them and then print and send them out.
Neat.
Yeah, we
really neat way of doing
that
it
as well. The paper discussion is a bit broader as well, because if you're looking at putting a print behind glass, or if it's going out for print sales, we're on single-sided at this point, obviously, so you've got a broader list of options. Some paper manufacturers, for example, won't use optical brighteners, which is supposed to give better longevity for prints, which is a question that we're not really dealing with portfolios, because they're closed up in a box as a tool and likely to be, refreshed on a fairly regular basis.
What's an optical bright? Sorry, what is that?
So in papers, so all of the papers that we put, all the inkjet papers, essentially, there's a base to them, and then there's a coating that goes over the top, which is what takes the ink. So if you look at two different papers, one is Hahnemann photo rag, for example, or the photo rag papers tend to be kind of creamier. If you look at a paper which is sort of bright white, so for example, Hahnemann does a bright white paper. In order to create that brightness on the sort of the same substrate that the paper is created from, they put what's called optical brightness into the coating, and it gives the page a brighter appearance, essentially. But there are sort of knock-on effects of that in terms of longevity of the frame.
And is that a technology that's been around for a while, or has that developed recently?
No, it's been around for a while, and different. So one of the brands that we use is Canson, and as far as I know, Mark, might be wrong, like none of their papers, I think, have any optical brightness in.
That's correct.
Yeah. So Hahnemann have some in some papers and less in others. It's an amount of things that it's not optical brightness or not. You could have lots or depending on what they're trying to achieve.
Basically, what that kind of translates to is if anything looks a lot brighter than, say, a Canson rag or even Hahnemann photo rag, if optical brighteners matter to you from an archival standpoint, you want to look it up and see what they're using, if they're using anything in terms of optical brighteners.
Optical brightness, is it basically like effectively bleaching the paper to just make it whiter?
Yeah, I'm not sure I haven't done a deep dive on it. Again, I think it's interesting because with portfolios, ideally you're putting new work in all the time.
I do have actually a very interesting, for me, not sure if it's interesting for the listeners, I would hope so. I used to seal my prints, and I would go through 3,000 aerosol cans of that nasty stuff, and you'd do it one way, and then you'd wait half an hour, and then you'd do it the other way. And I've got loads of pictures in my old studio where I used to have washing lines hung up, and I would then have it all hung up, being sealed with myself in a gas mask. It seems like a lot of effort for it. Also never really worked. Do you guys think that sealing prints is worth it?
We've done some experiments with it, and we have done it with some clients. Sorry, I missed that. We don't do it normally. We don't have the space or as we say, just you doing your own work there. You need a gas mask and lots of space. We can't really do that for all our clients. We've done it on occasion for books that are going to be hand stitched. So for a portfolio where the pages are being switched in and out, we kind of say to the photographers, look, you kind of you want to do it, that's can. But if it's being hand stitched into a family album type thing, which we've done some kind of high-end versions of those, we would potentially do that on that occasion, because once the page is in, it can't be replaced.
Sure.
In terms of whether it helps, it doesn't help with scratching or scuffing or any of that kind of thing.
No.
But it does help a bit with ink transfer. So just with the weight of the pages, with the book closed, ink transfer between pages on photo rag, we found it does help a little bit with that. So it might be one thing in that situation.
So that would be transfer of a heavily inked, so a dark area of a print being adjacent to maybe the back of a single-sided print, and it's white. It could transfer ink to the back of that, but
and that's just as it rubs together, right?
Shear, I call that shear, and I think every time a production assistant picks your book up and takes it to an agency, as you're just walking along, you get those pages are just in some kind of microwave. They're moving against each other. So I think choosing a paper that's robust, and it kind of means I don't want to do rag papers down because they're extremely popular, but something that's glossier, something that's got that's coated in a different way, which would be a Baryta paper or sort of a resin coated paper, is going to last longer. Is going to last longer from the standpoint of that kind of damage.
Sure. And obviously it's a proper investment, so you don't want to just have it and then 3 weeks later be like, oh, all the black areas have transferred. You want it to last a little while.
I had it recently where a photographer, we printed on rag paper, and she reprinted the whole portfolio on another paper within about 2 months because it just wasn't
Really?
work. It wasn't working. The ink transfer thing had happened, and it had happened significantly.
Yeah.
And we had told them ahead of time, this definitely can happen. For a lot of people, Hanamula Photorag, and for a lot of people, rag works. Interestingly, we don't get so many people reprinting pages that are damaged. We thought that would be kind of a major thing we'd be doing for our clients, but it's not really.
Oh, interesting. I wonder if it's just like people just have that as a vibe. It's like it gets slightly tatty, but then I don't know. Why wouldn't you? I guess also
Look at my
with,
gnarly portfolio.
yeah,
Exactly.
But if it's all the pages are going to have the same effect, aren't they? So you don't then want to have like 30 pages that are 6 months old and then 3 that are 2 weeks old, because then it'll look a bit odd, won't it?
It might look a bit odd. You could reprint it. My analogy there is kind of like, I have a turntable. I like listening to vinyl. I'm listening to the music. I'm not listening to the pops and the scratches and stuff. I think our directors, they see so many portfolios. Gnarly portfolio works for them. If it's really, really damaged, like if you've got bent pages, that looks careless. And you'd need to refresh, I think. But a while back, I went to an agent just to say hi, social call, and there were stacks of portfolios over in the corner. I said, "Can I go over and look at the portfolios?" And it was surprising how gnarly. It was surprising how worn the portfolios were, and some of them were definitely in need of refreshing or replacing page.
And then you thought, well, hang on, while I'm here,
Just popped a business card in and left.
Exactly.
MPrint was here.
Yeah.
Have you got anything that's kind of come in over the years that has particularly surprised you, or you've seen something that you think, well, I've never seen that done that way before, or been asked to do something in a particularly interesting way? Because there was a fantastic website years ago called, I mean, it's still around, but I'm not sure if they post that regularly. It was called No Plastic Sleeves. I think we've mentioned it on the podcast before, and it was a portfolio website that had some quite interesting examples of promos that people had done. And again, actually, a photo editor, who again we've mentioned plenty of times on the podcast before, he quite often puts interesting promos on his Instagram that he gets sent. And obviously the vast majority of these things are similar in the same way that most people, probably 97%, 98% of people are going to have an A3, or there's quite a high percentage of people who have the same thing just because it works, right? You don't necessarily need to change it, but every now and again, do you ever get anything in that you just think, this is cool?
Well, recently, we had a food photographer come in, and his first page, and Matt, can you remember what he said? Can we mention his name?
I don't know if he wanted his name or not, but it was like, ex-photographer. Do we want to get the phrasing right?
My name is X, and I want to make you hungry, in big sort of bold. Immediately he had me. I almost didn't need to look at the work. Very good photographer, so we knew the work was going to be good. But I'm laughing. I'm looking forward to turning the page. It was a great use of text, and I'm kind of surprised in the same way Matt and I almost never see square portfolios being chosen. I'm kind of surprised people don't make more use of text, but that surprised me in the best possible way, because I hadn't seen that done before.
Yeah,
He obviously didn't want to make you too hungry, because he didn't want you dribbling on his portfolio.
If he used a semi-gloss or a gloss, he could just wipe it off, right?
Well, exactly.
Glossy papers, yeah.
To clean your portfolio after each viewing would be pretty grim.
Service we need to offer, for sure.
With talking about text, do you think actually a lot of people could do their portfolios more as a design offering rather than just images, and then have it more, I mean, not talking about putting descriptions in and things like that, but, doing things like a big bold intro, that would obviously work. You remember it, right? Which means it's A, uncommon, but B, a decent idea.
I mean, isn't this what this portfolio is supposed to be doing? It's supposed to be kind of separating you from the competition somehow. However you can do that, I think is good. Yeah.
I think
It's a tough thing though to be unique, you know, to put something out there like that really does kind of stand out from the crowd. As you said, people tend to go for the safe option. I mean, it's interesting that Tom was mentioning about his portfolio being entirely iPad or you know, on screens now, and I get that. I understand that. My approach is to have my main portfolio printed, but then to go to meetings with my iPad, which has moving image work on there, and also maybe slightly more tailored portfolios for that particular client. So I can give them the main book and say, listen, especially if you're meeting more than one person, you know, which quite often can be the case, you can kind of give that one person your main book, and then you could be talking to the other person using your iPad and kind of showing them through work that way. So you can say, listen, that will give you a sense of who I am, and this gives you a sense of why I think, you know, I can work for you.
Yeah, I think portfolio, I think that's a great way to use the pixels and printed image. And a portfolio just kind of has to have you in it, right? It just has to show you. And if you aren't in the images, if you're just showing competence, you're just showing that you can shoot that drink, that bottle of whiskey in a certain kind of way. It maybe it works, but I think a portfolio that has more of you in it works a lot better. And then the iPad, you're right, you know, shuffling, that's where you can shuffle. And that sounds like what both of you do.
So ultimately, I mean, there's a lot of food for thought there. Not to kind of take that metaphor even further from talking about the food photographer, but anyway, there's lots to think about. I'm sure people will have lots of questions and follow up, and we'll put your details and everything at the end of this. But obviously, before we go, we always have our final questions. So there's two of you. It's going to be interesting to see whether or not you pick the same one or different ones. But we've got desert island camera. What would be what would be your desert island camera that you guys would take away with you?
Can I do a film one and a digital one? I mean, no is the answer. You're going to make me choose between a Ricoh GR1V, which I just love. I've got two of them, and I like the Sony RX100 range. I just bought a Mark V-A. It's great. I like them for all the same reasons, because they're tiny. They're shirt pocket cameras, great quality. It's almost like having a lens in your in the palm of your hand. It's like that would be my choice.
What would your film want? So the film is the Ricoh GR.
The Ricoh GR1V, and it's a fixed 28mm lens, so they don't fool around with the zoom. A cool camera, has pre-wind for your film, you know. So
popular street photographers, right? I think.
Exactly. Yeah.
Matt,
Nice.
What's yours?
So for me, it's a camera I got a little while ago. It's the Fuji X100 series, so mine's an S, but for me it kind of just got me back into just going out and enjoying my photography in a way that I kind of did when I started with a Nikon FM2. It kind of just had that very similar sort of feel to me, just everything right there at your fingertips instead of some manual control and so on. And it's just, I love the files out of it when I got it, and it's just an easy, nice camera to use in a way that it just kind of took me away from the kind of things I was using for work. So really enjoy.
We're going to have a nerd off then about Fuji colors at some point, me and you, because I'll be interested to. You're going to know a lot more about it than me, but I have that camera. I've owned all of the X100s. I do love it. I've started to use that one less, I think, than my previous ones, because the one gripe I have is the buttons on Fujis. They just need to rethink the ergonomics slightly. They're just a bit too small. Just make them easier to find. You want a camera that's kind of like really just it without even looking at it. But that's not the point of this feature. But yes, me and you, we're going to chat. And then, so books. What's your desert island books that you'd be taking away? Now, Mark, I think you've got a bit of a cheeky one here, because you've got a book out, right?
I do have a book out. It was published last year in the UK and in North America, and it's called Extinction, and the subtitle is Our Fragile Relationship with Life on Earth. So I shot for 10 years in a natural history museum in Chicago. I shot specimens of extinct threatened species and also conservation successes. So there, in 82 species, we have a look at the causes of biodiversity loss. And
Cool.
yeah, so yeah, but we have a look at the causes of biodiversity loss, like habitat loss, far and away the biggest problem. We're also looking at pollution and climate change and the wildlife trade. So
Wow. So is this the
Nice.
one you're taking to the desert island?
yeah, I think I'm going to have to take that.
It's quite fitting
Smart
that you're
man.
basically taking a portfolio.
It's a dense read. Matt did the retouching on the images, by the way, and one of my sons, Ben, and his friend and colleague Nathan, they're both biologists, and they wrote the chapter introduction. So it's a good read. Every time I pick it up, I learn something. So I'll never get
Oh,
bored
wow.
reading that. Yeah.
Nice. Perfect. And what about you, Matt?
I think mine's probably going to be Hokkaido by Michael Kenner.
Yep.
It's a beautiful book, got a wood cover, which I've always really kind of just enjoyed. Kind of idea of doing that, almost kind of going back to your question, Greg, about just doing things differently with portfolios. And
But
perhaps
also,
if
I
I'm-
mean, if you need a fire on the desert island, that's quite good having a book you made of wood.
it is, and also a reminder that there's snow and trees and things like that. Stop sweating away under the sun.
It's a beautiful
Nice.
book. It is a beautiful book. So we'll link to both of those. Guys, thank you so much for your time coming on the show. If people want to follow you or find you online, where can they go?
I guess our biggest presence, well, apart from the website, mprint.co.uk, is on Instagram, where we're at MPrint Folios.
And there's that. That's just FOLIOS.
Yeah.
Yes.
MPrint
Yeah,
and
sorry.
PRINT folios. Yeah.
And then obviously the website's just mprint.co.uk.
It is.
Perfect. Well, listen, chaps, thank you so much for coming on. That was absolutely a brilliant chat. Loved it.
Well, thanks for having us on.
I'm sorry I have an iPad. But I actually don't think it'll be long before I give you a call and we'll do a print.
You know where we are. We're ready.
We're around you until we convert you.
Yeah.
I look forward to it.
Thank you so
Perfect.
much for having us.
Anytime. Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys.
Thank you very much for listening to the latest episode of the Exposed Negative podcast. If you'd like to support the show, you can do that by heading to our Patreon or doing one-offs. The details are on the website, and the Patreon is patreon.com/exposed negative. We'd love it if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/exposed negative. And obviously, we're on Instagram, which is xnegative. If you want to follow us personally, mine is tombarnes.com on Instagram. And the website. And then Greg's is at Greg Fennell, and that's Funnell. So, thank you very much for taking the time to listen, and hopefully you enjoy the next one.